On October 16th, 1978, Karol Józef Wojtyła is elected as the new pope and becomes Pope John Paul II. The election of the first Slavic pontiff, and a Polish one at that, is the first in a series of falling dominoes which will unravel the entire Soviet Empire. Then KGB director Yuri Andropov was convinced that Pope John Paul II's election was part of a Western conspiracy aimed at undermining the Soviet Union. Originally, this claim was dismissed by both Americans and Europeans alike as nothing more than fanciful Soviet propaganda. But given what we now know about the nature of geopolitics and the series of events that transpired in Eastern Europe in the 1980s, it is time to revisit Andropov's claims. So, was the election of Pope John Paul II part of a CIA conspiracy to undermine the Soviet Union? Let's take a look at the shocking facts. Poland is one of the most devout Catholic countries anywhere on Earth, with upwards of 90% of the population being followers of Roman Catholicism. It has often been remarked that the one thing the Soviet Union could never touch in Poland was the Catholic Church. If the CIA and Western allies were looking for the Soviet Union's Achilles heel, for an independent and powerful institution within the Soviet borders that had enormous sway with the public, then they needn't look any further than the Catholic Church. In Roman Catholicism, the Pope is the head of the entire worldwide Catholic Church and is believed to be infallible. A sympathetic Polish Pope would therefore make the perfect Trojan horse for destabilizing the Soviet Union. Now, there was a long-standing tradition in the Catholic Church to elect popes who were Italian-born. In fact, Pope Adrian VI, who was elected in the year 1522, was the last non-Italian pope prior to John Paul II. This means that John Paul II was the first non-Italian pope in more than 455 years. And not only is he not Italian, he happens to be Polish. Mysterious circumstances surround Pope John Paul II's election in 1978. In Catholic history, this year is known as the Year of Three Popes. On the 6th of August, 1978, Pope Paul VI dies. 20 days later, Albino Luciani is elected and becomes Pope John Paul I on August 26th. 33 days later, at 65 years of age, Pope John Paul I dies suddenly of a heart attack. There are many inconsistencies reported surrounding his death. There were disputes regarding who found his body, how he died, the issuing of the death certificate, the conduction of an autopsy, along with numerous procedural anomalies. Such bizarre circumstances led to an explosion of conspiracy theories. Many thought that Pope John Paul I was killed by other members of the Catholic Church after possibly uncovering a massive corruption scandal involving the Vatican Bank, which had financial ties to Banco Ambrosiano, which would collapse in 1982, losing a cool $3.5 billion, and the Vatican lost $250 million. Other conspiracies involved the CIA and the KGB. While we will never know exactly how John Paul I died, or whether or not it was by natural causes, it will become evident by the end of this video that the man who was to become the next Pope, John Paul II, is the man responsible for the collapse of the Soviet Empire. When we consider all of the facts taken together, it appears likely that this process was not being guided by the invisible hand of God, but by the unseen hand of the CIA. How could the CIA exert influence over the cardinal electoral process for selecting a new pope? The perfect bargaining chip involves one of the largest global criminal cover-ups in history. Child sexual abuse was rampant in the Catholic Church at this time, with several hundred priests implicated, with more than 1,000 victims who suffered tens of thousands of criminal acts of exploitation. Many leaders in the Catholic Church knew what was going on, and desperate to save the image of a church which was already in decay, and to save their own personal reputations as well, they covered it up year after year. They moved the priests to different parishes and countries and ignored the claims and swept the entire thing under the rug. What if the CIA knew about these crimes? What if they had evidence of these crimes? What if they threatened the Catholic cardinals into electing the man who would become Pope John Paul II, or risk being exposed? What if they were responsible for the death of John Paul I in order to install their Trojan horse? What if the cardinals refused the first time around? If Andropov was right, and Pope John Paul II's election was part of a CIA plot to destabilize the USSR, then I believe the CIA likely had stockpiles of evidence regarding the rampant ongoing pedophilia in the priesthood, and used this evidence to blackmail the cardinals. After all, numerous bishops and cardinals were directly involved in the cover-up, and the image and reputation of the entire Roman Catholic Church was at stake. It's not inconceivable that this sort of pressure could have forced the cardinals' hands into electing the Polish Pope. Now, here's where the timeline gets interesting. On October 16th, 1978, Karol Józef Wojtyła is elected as the new pope and becomes Pope John Paul II. During the installation mass for his papacy, Pope John Paul II prayed, quote, "Do not be afraid. Open wide the doors for Christ. To his saving power open the boundaries of states, economic and political systems, the vast fields of culture, civilization, and development. Do not be afraid." End quote. This immediately sent shockwaves throughout the communist bloc. Just as soon as the Polish Pope is elected, panic begins to set in at the KGB headquarters in Moscow. A furious Andropov orders a, quote, "massive analysis," end quote, on the potential impact a Polish Pope could have on the Soviet Union. The head of the KGB believed this election to have been part of a CIA conspiracy aimed at destabilizing the USSR, and he believed that the election of Pope John Paul II was potentially devastating for the entire Soviet Union. Andropov ordered a large-scale disinformation and discrediting campaign, and he also issued a directive to take out the Pope by any means necessary. In other words, an assassination plot. During a visit to the Polish capital in June of 1979, an estimated 3 million people turn out to welcome the Polish Pope home. Pope John Paul II tells this group of devout Catholics that they must not be afraid, a phrase which is echoed in the Bible numerous times. And then he prayed, quote, "Let your spirit descend and change the image of the land, this land," end quote. In August 1980, a little more than a year after this visit, the Solidarity movement begins in the Gdańsk shipyard on the Baltic Sea. The first independent labor union is established inside the Soviet Union by Lech Wałęsa, following a strike by the workers. It is widely believed that the Polish Solidarity movement was covertly funded by the Vatican Bank, and Solidarity would orchestrate numerous strikes from here on afterwards. There's a failed assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. He is shot several times while entering St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. This assassination attempt is believed to have been orchestrated by the KGB. December 13th, 1981. In response to a rapidly growing solidarity movement, the USSR pressures Polish Defense Minister General Jaruzelski into imposing martial law, creating a military junta, and massively restricting public life. Strict martial law would remain in place until July 1983. The Solidarity movement was outlawed, and Lech Wałęsa is imprisoned. In June 1983, Pope John Paul II visits Poland once again and holds numerous masses throughout the country as millions turn out to see him. The Polish Pope speaks every day before fellow Poles about the Christian history of Eastern Europe, about how Europe must turn to Christianity if it is to advance, about how communism and Christianity are diametrically opposed, and about how the state must always be subsidiary to the full sovereignty of the nation. Shortly before leaving his native country, Pope John Paul II has a highly secretive private meeting with newly released Solidarity leader Lech Wałęsa. The Pope gives a prayer for good to triumph over evil in Poland, hinting at freedom and Christianity to triumph over the despotic, atheistic, communist regime. On October 5th, 1983, roughly 3 months after the Pope's visit, leader of the Polish Solidarity movement Lech Wałęsa is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and the eyes of the world turn to him. Is it possible that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded for political purposes? To add fuel to the Trojan horse solidarity movement which was destabilizing the USSR? In the years leading up to 1989, Solidarity will grow more and more powerful and successfully orchestrate numerous strikes. Polish Solidarity begins to directly challenge the Soviet authority, and it inspires a wave of anti-communist activity throughout the Soviet satellite states. This wave would quickly swell into a tsunami which would sweep away the entire Soviet Union. Revolutions begin in Poland and continue in Hungary, East Germany, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. In East Germany, unheard-of mass protests lead to the fall of the Berlin Wall on the 9th of November. Less than 10 years after the election of the Polish Pope, the KGB's worst fears had come to fruition. The USSR had collapsed. Was this collapse caused by a bizarre series of perfect coincidences? Perhaps guided by the invisible hand of God? Or, as is so often the case in the great game of geopolitical chess, was this series of astonishing events which collapsed the Soviet Union guided by the unseen hand of the CIA?